In 1922, a mysterious man arrived in Paris with just one suitcase. And within 6 months, he was controlling the minds of Europe's most powerful families. He wasn't a politician, he wasn't rich, he had no noble titles. But he knew something that made them completely dependent on him. That man was George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. And today you will discover the secret method he used to dominate anyone in minutes. But be careful. Because after watching this video, you will never see people the same way again. Before we begin, I need to tell you something that will seem impossible. In 1924, during a dinner at Countess de Salzmann's mansion, Gurdjieff looked into a Swiss banker's eyes for exactly 47 seconds. When he finished, the banker was in tears. And the next day he transferred 2 million francs for Gurdjieff's activities. What happened in those 47 seconds? What did Gurdjieff see? And more importantly, what did he make the banker see? I'm going to show you the exact technique he used. But first, you need to understand who this man really was. Gurdjieff wasn't just a spiritual teacher as many think. He was something far more dangerous. An engineer of human consciousness. He managed to get Russian aristocrats to abandon their fortunes to follow him, French intellectuals to give up their careers, wives of diplomats to leave their husbands, and American millionaires to donate everything they had. How did a man with no formal education, born in a small town in the Caucasus, gain such power over such brilliant minds? The answer lies in what he discovered during his 20 lost years. 20 years he spent in places that officially never existed, learning secrets that should never have been revealed. Between 1887 and 1912, Gurdjieff simply disappeared. There are no official records, no photos, no documents. It's as if he was erased from history. But through fragments found in his own writings, we can reconstruct his journey. And it is absolutely terrifying. Gurdjieff traveled to secret monasteries in Tibet, hidden fraternities in Afghanistan, and initiatory societies in Egypt. But not as a spiritual tourist. He was looking for something specific. He was searching for what he called objective knowledge of the human machine. In other words, he wanted to discover how to hack the human mind. In his book Meetings with Remarkable Men, he tells of an old sage in Bukhara who taught him something revolutionary. People are not a unity. They are a multiplicity. And whoever controls that multiplicity controls the person. And that's exactly what he did when he arrived in Paris. Gurdjieff's system was based on a shocking discovery. 99% of people live in a state of waking sleep. They believe they are awake, but in reality they are completely unconscious. He divided each person into 3 centers: the intellectual center, thoughts, the emotional center, feelings, and the motor center, actions. And he discovered that when these centers are misaligned, the person becomes completely manipulable. Gurdjieff's first weapon was his gaze. He trained for hours to be able to read a person's dominant center in seconds. Once identified, he knew exactly where to press. Catherine Mansfield, the famous English writer, described her first meeting with Gurdjieff. He looked at me and immediately knew everything about me. It was as if my soul was naked before him. Gurdjieff had a devastating technique. He created situations where he forced people to see their own internal contradictions. In minutes, they would enter an existential crisis. And become completely dependent on him to solve that crisis. During his dinners at the Château du Prieuré, he would ask seemingly simple questions like, "Why do you believe that you are you?" Or "What proves that you exist right now?" People would leave there questioning their own reality. But his most powerful weapon was the controlled shock. He created extreme situations to break people's automatic patterns and implant new commands in their minds. In 1923, he convinced a group of wealthy disciples to build a cosmic machine in the Institute's garden. For 3 months, they dug holes, moved gigantic stones, and worked to exhaustion. Only to discover later that it was just an exercise. But they all continued to pay their monthly fees religiously. The most terrifying part? He documented all of this in his books. He hid nothing. He explained exactly how he manipulated people. And yet, they kept coming. By 1924, Gurdjieff was no longer just a teacher. He had created a true invisible empire spread across Europe and America. His disciples included Lady Rothermere, wife of the media mogul, Frank Lloyd Wright, America's most famous architect, A.R. Orridge, editor of London's most influential magazine, and Maurice Nicoll, psychiatrist to the English aristocrats. But the most brilliant thing was how he maintained control over all of them simultaneously. Gurdjieff created what he called octaves, separate groups that didn't know of each other's existence. Each group believed it was special, the inner circle. But in reality, they were all pieces in a much bigger game that only Gurdjieff saw completely. Between 1922 and 1949, It is estimated that Gurdjieff collected the equivalent of more than $50 million today, without ever having an official profession. He didn't charge fixed fees. Instead, he used a devastating psychological technique. He asked people to contribute according to the value they placed on the knowledge. The result? They gave much more than they would have for any monthly fee. Orage, who had abandoned his successful journalistic career to follow Gurdjieff, once asked, "Master, when will I know if I'm making progress?" Gurdjieff replied, "When you stop asking that question." Orage never questioned again. And never stopped paying. But the real genius was in how he created absolute emotional dependence. Gurdjieff alternated between moments of intense revelation and periods of calculated coldness. This created a psychological addiction. People became dependent on his approval. Jean de Salzmann, one of the most devoted disciples, described, "Living without Mr. Gurdjieff's presence was like trying to breathe without air. Everything lost its meaning." And the most frightening thing? Even today, almost 75 years after his death, there are still Gurdjieffian groups spread around the world following the exact same methods. Paying fortunes for the same teachings. Perpetuating the same system of mind control. In 1949, at the age of 83, Gurdjieff was dying. But even on his deathbed, he still completely controlled his disciples. His last words were to Jean de Salzmann, "Now you must carry all of this alone." With a single sentence, he transferred 30 years of psychological dependence from himself to her. And it worked. Salzmann took full control of the work and kept the empire running for another 40 years, until her own death in 1990. Today, there are more than 300 official Gurdjieffian groups around the world. Some charge up to $50,000 for intensive courses. All of them using the exact same techniques he developed 100 years ago. But here's the question no one wants to ask: if Gurdjieff really wanted to awaken people, why did he create a system that made them more dependent than ever? The answer lies in a phrase he wrote, but few paid attention to: "Man is a machine. And machines need operators." Perhaps Gurdjieff never tried to free anyone. Perhaps he simply exchanged one form of slavery for another, with himself as the new master. After studying Gurdjieff for years, I came to a terrifying conclusion: he was probably the most brilliant manipulator in modern history. But the real lesson isn't about Gurdjieff. It's about us. Because the techniques he used 100 years ago still work perfectly today. How many times have you found yourself following someone without questioning? How many times have you paid for promises of transformation? How many times have you felt that you need a certain person's approval? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you might be getting Gurdjieffized right now. The only defense against manipulators like Gurdjieff is knowledge. So, if you want to protect yourself, and maybe even understand how these techniques really work, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. And in the next video, I'm going to reveal the 5 mental manipulation techniques that Gurdjieff secretly taught his closest disciples. Techniques they used to control other people and that were never published. Until then, be careful who you follow.